from the vault, high atop the pastoral center of the Diocese of Camden, you're listening to Talking Catholic.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Talking Catholic. I'm Jen Morrow, and with me today is Mike Walsh. Hi, Mike.
Hi, Jen. How are you?
Good. I was going to introduce that to say today is Mike Walsh with Jen Morrow because it's been like 6 weeks since I've been on the podcast, and I felt like I needed a shout out, so I'm giving myself a shout out. Jen's back.
If anybody's wondering, Jen has not been benched. Jen, however, did have the opportunity to take 10 days off, so that took her out twice. And then we had two Katie Hagans, who's now been fully introduced into the podcast with a couple of great episodes. And matter of fact, one that if you haven't listened to it yet, the previous episode with Katie was with Dr. Mike Sims, who's one of the newest members of the Diocese of Camden staff for Life and Justice. And it might be one of the ones where we've certainly laughed the most. I hadn't had an opportunity to spend much time with Mike in the month that he's been here. I didn't realize he had such a sense of humor and an infectious laugh. So if you like to listen to people laugh their way through a podcast, I encourage you to go back and listen to last week's. But what have you been up to in the 6 weeks since you've been on the podcast, Jen?
Well, like you said, I took some time off. I did a little staycation, did a little traveling around New Jersey, New York, and Pennsylvania. Picked some flowers, literally smelled the roses. I guess they were tulips, so smelled the tulips. And now I currently have all of the windows in my house buttoned up short, closed since the pollen is out. And I don't want that to affect. So it's like I smelled the flowers and now I'm blocking them out as much as possible until the pollen goes away. But it was a good week and a half off, and it was Holy Week, so I got to spend all of those days in my parish, St. Francis of Assisi in Long Beach Island. Though I did spend Good Friday with Bishop Sullivan in Atlantic City during the Way of the Cross walk through the streets, and then the the service in Spanish, which was beautiful, beautiful. I love hearing Bishop Sullivan preach in Spanish. I think it's beautiful, and I had the Magnificat with me, so I could follow along in English. So it was fun. It's fun.
Actually, it's funny. A friend of mine who is not Catholic attended the confirmation of his nephew this past weekend and had to take it upon himself to text me, I'm hoping after the Mass, to let me know what an outstanding homilist Bishop Sullivan was or is. And that was actually quite heartening because I've often thought that that's one of his truly great gifts is his ability as a orator from the pulpit. And I know for a fact he spends a lot of time working on his homilies. And he really is dedicated to it. And I have to say, I never have to worry. He's one of those people you never have to worry when you find out you're going to a Mass and he's the homilist. You're like, all right, I'm going to get a good one today. I'm going to get a good one today.
You know what I like about his homilies is that he repeats his message. Like he'll say the same sentence, usually short sentences, like 2 or 3 times to like really nail it home. And I love that because it puts so much emphasis on this is what you should be paying attention to. Wake up. You know, I love that about his homily and the way he writes. He writes similarly. I like that.
You know what? We've never done a podcast on this, but maybe we need to do a podcast on homilies because, and I'm saying this with respect, there are a number of people, not just Catholics, who are terrible homilists or sermon givers. I think if we dedicated a podcast or perhaps an entire podcast series to great homilists and their outstanding homilies and what they do to focus on that, I think that'd be great. Might even want to bring in, I don't know, maybe somebody that works at a seminary and could tell us how the seminarians are taught.
That's a really good idea.
Is that not a good idea?
Yeah, it's pretty great. It's pretty great. Let's do that.
Okay. But,
so other than that, I've just been putting the paper together with the hardworking staff. And what have you been up to, Mr. Walsh?
Nothing.
No, that's it? Nothing?
No, it's we're now moving into what's next mode. So, we finished up the Eucharistic Congress a few weeks ago, and now it's, looking towards the diocesan phase of Eucharistic revival. as well as, the Synod. And the next steps of the Synod are coming up. The USCCB just released their, I don't know what you call it, their element of the Global Synod to the Vatican. And they published that, so I read through that recently. I'm going to tell you right now, I think ours was better. Just laying that out there. I think that the Diocese of Camden's was a little more specific than the USCCB's, but what are you going to do? And then everybody knows, we were talking about Bishop Sullivan, so he's 78. We know we're on new bishop watch. So as we get towards the end of the spring, before the Vatican shuts down, this is when all of the rumor mongering really spools up as to, is there going to be a new bishop announced? Who's it going to be? Where are they going to be from? Things like that. So currently I'm fending off people who are attacking me for tidbits, even though, as I tell everybody, I don't have a clue. I'm going to basically find out with everybody else when it's announced. So I don't know. But hey, you got any tips? Talking Catholic at CamdenDiocese.org. Feel free to send in your tips.
I keep my ringer on my phone. Like, there's only 2 breakthrough numbers. One of them, well, it's not you, but it might be soon, because I'll be waiting for that 5 o'clock call when we find out, of a new bishop coming or something soon.
What makes you think I'm going to call you?
Because we're in the newspaper business. We have to know.
No. The journalists find out last.
Mike,
you would think one of these days we would do a Zoom version of this, and I would remember to turn on my do not disturb on my phone. Yeah.
Well, terrible. Ironically, the call came in while we're talking about a call.
Well, that one's from the accounting department, so I know that doesn't have anything to do with the future bishop.
That's no good. Yeah, hey, before one more thing, I just remembered. Are you taking part in the diocesan softball game this year?
No, I'm on the disabled list. Ever since my knee went bad on me, I had to bow out this year. I'm allowed to go back and play for Our Lady of Peace Parish anytime I feel up for it. But with Jack in the middle of baseball season for Paul VI High School, I don't think that's going to happen until June at the earliest, if I feel up to it. But thank you for asking. They have asked me to continue to take photographs. Once again, that will happen after baseball season is done, because the kid outranks everybody else right now.
Gotcha.
There you are. All right. Now, listen, Jen, we have a very important guest today. He is one of my favorite people in the entire world, mostly to bedevil, but often with only the greatest amount of respect. And I have to say, he was so kind to give me a tour of his place of work right now. I only had to browbeat him for the better part of 45 minutes to get him to invite me, but it was very sweet. So when I was I was on pilgrimage recently, and I spent, like 7 days in Israel and 5 days in Assisi in Rome. While I was in Rome, I actually got to spend some time with him, and it was the best. So let me first introduce Father Michael Romano, the Director of Admissions for the Pontifical North American College in Rome. Hey, Father, how are you?
All right, Mike. Great to be with you.
You're not gonna say that I didn't need to browbeat you. I had an open invitation to come to the NAC anytime I wanted.
I was getting more concerned that you were thinking I was going to give you some tidbits on who the next bishop's going to be.
No, I know better than that.
But I certainly understand that you know that I wrote all of Bishop Sullivan's homilies for him. So now,
of course,
I took that compliment.
Well, I write all of his columns, so it seems fair. By the way, that is not true. I do not write all of his columns. I only write. Nice. We may have edited one or two, but we don't write them. And we also have with us someone else from the North American College that I'm going to let Jen introduce, because she is so good with unique names.
What a setup. We have Deacon Zane Langenbrunner. He is a seminarian from the Diocese of Fort Wayne, South Bend. I'm kind of getting a look that I got close to the name. Deacon Zane, right. You want to correct me?
Yeah, Deacon Zane Langenbrunner. Of course, before the show we were talking that, the German version, Langenbrunner. I mean, you've got that probably better than any of my family members do. So your pronunciation is actually probably closer to the truth than our own. But thanks for having me on. I'm happy to be here with you.
Well, thanks for being on. And you're also a student at the Pontifical North American College as well. Is that correct?
That's right. Yep. So I live actually just down the hall from Father Romano. He's my formation advisor, and he and I meet about once a month or so, kind of talk about formation, and we spent a lot of time together here over these past 4 years. And I feel like I know a little bit about South Jersey just by getting to know Father Romano. Even though I'm a Midwesterner, I've never been to Jersey in my life, but I'm hoping someday to come on out there and visit him and hopefully see some of you guys too. So.
Absolutely. You're always welcome. And yes, once Father Romano is back home where he belongs in South Jersey, I can only hope that you seminarians will come out to visit us. So, Father Michael, it was a great opportunity for me to see you while we were in Italy. But you are someone who works at a place where travel is encouraged. And I know during your time as a seminarian at the NAC, you traveled around a lot. But we're actually having you on this week because of a particular bit of traveling you did recently. You and some of the seminarians headed to Ethiopia for a little while?
Yeah, fortunately, finally, we're back to normal life here in Europe and really throughout the world. So 4 years ago, when Deacon Zane and I arrived here after a few months, the pandemic began and all the opportunities to travel really went away for a few years. And one of the programs that takes place every other year is that normally Catholic Relief Services, CRS, offers the opportunity during Easter week for a group to go and to see some of the work that they do in developing countries or in places that really are in need of all that they're able to do that the countries can't provide for themselves. So this year, CRS was taking 5 of our seminarians and then myself and one of the other priests formation advisors to Ethiopia. We left on Easter Sunday and then returned the following Sunday. And I just had such a wonderful time that I contacted you and said, we got to talk about this so that people can know the good things that CRS does.
Yeah, just for our listeners, I need you to understand just how amazing this was. Like, I nearly had a stroke. Usually it takes, you've heard of shotgun weddings. So we sometimes have a shotgun podcast when it comes to getting Father Romano on it. I basically have to force him on. This one, I get an email out of the blue saying, "Hey, can we come on the podcast and talk about this?" I mean, I quite literally was stunned. So thank you for that, Father Romano.
I was very selfish with the podcast. Normally it was only to promote iRace for Vocations. So this is something a little bit different.
No, but it's just as important. And as some of our listeners may realize, is that this is right within the wheelhouse of Jennifer Morrow, our managing editor of the Catholic Star Herald, who has been connected to CRS for many years, right, Jen?
Yeah, for a couple of years. I started trying to help form a chapter in the Diocese of Trenton before I came to the Diocese of Camden, and have kept in touch with a lot of the volunteers and staffers who work with CRS, and they do great work. We've had a few of them on the podcast, I think more than once actually, to talk about CRS in the US and outside, and how the war in Ukraine has also affected the world. So they do amazing work. So when when Mike Walsh forwarded me the email, I literally think there was a yay that came out of this office, and a high-pitched more like yay, because I was really honored that he wanted to come on. So this should be a good one. But so, Father Romano, were you familiar with CRS? I'm assuming that you have been before this trip, and some of the seminarians.
So, I mean, the background would be that Catholic Relief Services has had this trip for seminarians to learn about their work so that once they were ordained, they could go and talk about it in their parishes and dioceses. Since before I was a seminarian, but when I was here in Rome back in the early 2000s, as a seminarian, 2 of my closest buddies went on the CRS trip to India, and they came back, and the way that they spoke about their experience of of what they learned, what they witnessed, it just gave me this desire. That was back in 2006, I think. Gave me this desire to actually myself be able to participate in a CRS trip. It's taken a long time for this to be able to happen, but that was probably my first experience of learning about Catholic Relief Services. And then the second time that I really began to learn a lot more was working for Bishop Sullivan. He was such a vocal proponent of all that Catholic Relief Services does. He would always be talking about them as the boots on the ground organization. Whenever an emergency happens, they're the people to donate your money to because they actually have the connections and you know where your money is going. And so I had a conviction just from hearing about him, about their work, but wanted to be able to experience it for myself. So when this opportunity came forward and I realized I was going to be able to participate, I jumped on it right away.
And I think you just kind of brought up a good point. And this is something that those from the Catholic Relief Services who've been on the podcast before have mentioned, that, you know, when anybody donates to CRS, a lot of those monies are international funds, and they go to help CRS workers and volunteers in different countries provide an infrastructure and kind of lift up the local communities themselves by getting in and help them with the training that's needed or the recovery that's needed, but also so that when they leave, that work continues. Is that what you've seen as well, Father Romano?
I think that's really one of the things that struck us so much. Deacon Zane and I were talking about this before we all got on the Zoom call with you, to say, to me, that was one of the most inspiring things about Catholic Relief Services was that they don't like just come in and say, this is what you have to do. They get to know the local community, find out what they think they need, work with them to find out how they can accomplish that, and then give them the tools that they need to be able to take care of themselves. And Catholic Relief Services can leave, and it gives them a sense of independence. And it's really a beautiful, way of being Catholic and what we're called to do. Subsidiarity would be the way that they live that out.
And Deacon Zane. I'm sorry.
No, I'm just curious, Deacon Zane, as a good boy from the Midwest, had you spent much time in Africa before this trip?
Yeah, I hadn't been able to get there before this trip. Yeah, this is our first time in Africa, so we all had to go to one of the health clinics around here and get vaccinated from yellow fever and I think a couple of us had to get some other shots too. And it was kind of nerve-wracking a little bit getting over there. We're used to traveling all around Europe, but with the EU, the way it is, you pretty much just land in a country and you're there because you're already in Europe. So traveling to Africa, traveling down to Ethiopia definitely felt a little bit different. And but really, and I didn't really know what to expect exactly, but they were just so hospitable to us and so wonderful in welcoming us. And I think about like the bishop of Harar, where we were seeing a lot of the CRS projects going on. He met us at the airport. He actually came with some of the staff members who were engaged in some of these irrigation and agricultural projects. And met us at the airport and picked us up. And so we got to, he was like the first person that we met when we got off the plane. So it was amazing just how we were welcomed every single place that we went. And they always had coffee for us. And they have this kind of traditional coffee ceremony that they have in Ethiopia. I don't know if you knew, but Ethiopia is the place where they think coffee was originally invented. There's this little town called Kaffa, and they have this whole legend about, I think it was like a goat that discovered a coffee plant, and they noticed that the goat, whenever he ate the coffee beans, was getting very excited. And so they said, well, maybe we'll try that for ourselves. And so, but they have this whole, whenever they drink coffee, it's like this communal celebration. They bring everyone together, and pretty much everywhere that we visited, they had coffee and some snacks, refreshments for us. And we're just so happy to welcome a group of mostly Americans, just being there into their native place. And it wasn't long before we really felt at home among those people. So an incredible experience for me.
I have to say that actually sort of checks out. I've had the pleasure of knowing some Ethiopians over my career. I have to tell you, they're the friendliest people I think I've ever met in my entire life. So it's good to hear that it checks out in the home country as well. So, yeah, Father Romano, tell us a little bit about the trip itself. Like, what were you able to do while you were there?
Yeah, so as Deacon Zane said, once we got there, we flew into the capital, Addis Ababa, on Easter Sunday. I guess it was Monday by then. Of course, the situation in Ethiopia is a little bit different because there are so few Catholics that they actually follow the Orthodox calendar. So we celebrated Easter Sunday and then flew down to Ethiopia and arrived on Monday, which was Monday of Holy Week for them. So we were kind of going through Holy Week a second time just in Ethiopia and didn't have as much of Easter celebrations as before. But as soon as we landed in Addis Ababa, then we flew east towards the Somali border and landed in this town called Jijiga. And the bishop immediately greeted us at the airport, which we were really kind of shocked by that he would take time out of his schedule. And he was so good to us that he actually moved the location of his chrism mass. So he inconvenienced all of his priests so that he could host us at his cathedral and his residence later in the week for mass and a dinner.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, that says kind of the way that we were treated throughout the week. And it wasn't so much like a mission trip for us, but really for us to see what was going on, get to know the situation and see the work that happens. And so we went in particular to the east because that section of Ethiopia has been suffering through a drought for the past 3 years. And by the time you hit the third year of a drought, at that point, your livestock really begins to die. And that was the livelihood of most of the Somalis who were migrating throughout that section of Ethiopia. And so what CRS was doing through their local partner, which was this vicariate or diocese of Harar, was doing a lot of water projects. So drilling wells, creating reservoirs, and getting water to the local communities. So I would say that for our first few days, it was a lot of us going into these extremely remote areas. We were on these Range Rovers, right, Zane? So we were on these Range Rovers driving down these dirt roads. God bless our drivers that took such good care of us. But to places that you would never think that people would be living. But here they were, little communities that had been displaced because of the drought. And CRS went and found them, and then would drill these wells, and we would hear stories about how women would have to go and travel 6 to 9 hours a day just to go to a local water source and then bring that back home. And so what they were really trying to do was to provide water closer to home so that the women and children could live the lives that they should, closer to home, that the kids could go to school, and there's just that they would have a better existence until the drought comes to an end, and then they would be able to go back. So we saw some wonderful reservoirs, incredible engineering that took place for it to happen. And CRS's local partners in this vicariate are so good, so fast, and use the money so well that our last project that we visited, they actually were just about ready to start the water. That was going to begin in 2 weeks. But the only reason that they were able to do that project was because they had extra money from a project before that, which I don't know that you would have that happen in many places, that the money would be so well spent that they could do an additional project. So I'll let Deacon Zane say a little bit more, but that was kind of our initial interactions in Ethiopia.
Yeah, no, and just kind of on that last part, that project that we visited, they really had, I think it was about $50,000 or something like that. And from start to finish with that project, about $50,000, start to finish 2 years. And in that time, they were able to construct this entire water system that is delivering water to 5 different villages in this very remote part of Ethiopia. And we were kind of, one of the villages is like kind of up on the hill, and that's where the reservoir is. And they pump the water from kind of down in the valley where there's like a groundwater source where they can find some water within the ground, pump it up to this reservoir on the top of the hill. And then just, and that's just through solar power. So they just have solar panels. And then from there, it's just gravity and this piping system that kind of delivers that water to all these different communities, something like, I think like 6,000 people or something like that who have never had, water in their own villages. And all of a sudden, 2 years, $50,000, CRS gets that. They know who to partner with in order to make those kinds of life-changing projects happen, to really to deliver water to people who, like Father Romano was saying, would have to spend all day just going and finding, whatever water they could. And now they're getting fresh, clean water being pumped right to their doorstep, basically. So just amazing to kind of see the type of transformations that can happen when they have the support and the resources that they need.
Was CRS working with locals to build that system? Was it like the local community working on that?
So the way they usually do it, this is my understanding, is they have kind of a team of engineers and experts in irrigation and agricultural sciences, climate sciences, kind of designing these projects, and I think working to install them as well. And while they're doing that, they're having members of the community, observe what's going on and explain to them how the system works. And the goal is always, by the end of one of these water installation programs, they call it the WASH program. The goal is to appoint a council made up of people from those local communities that are in charge for the maintenance and upkeep of those resources. And so they have a panel, made up of people from these villages, women and men, who are kind of taking charge of that system and communicating with them. So they really kind of try to give them everything that they need, and then instruct and appoint a board or a council of sorts that then they can support. And then it's the local community themselves who are really managing that resource, which was very impressive to me. I think that, someone had a question about, in some of these really impoverished communities, how do you ensure security of the solar panels or any of the technology and things like that? How do you make sure that no one's going in and stealing something or breaking something? And their response was basically we work with the communities, and everyone knows that if they mess with this thing, it's you're not going to have water. I mean, they all just kind of instinctively seem to know that, and recognize that. And that was one of the things that we really found in these communities, is that it's not, they're in the midst of this drought and they're having a lot of trouble just getting water. And without water, it's really hard to do anything, right? It's hard to grow crops. It's hard to feed your keep your livestock alive. It's hard to have a normal life when you don't have a consistent water source. But even despite all those challenges, the amazing thing about every community that we visited is there's just such a cohesion in each one of these villages. Even in kind of the most acutely affected areas, there's just such a tight-knit communities that we were finding in these very remote places. So it really is they do everything together. And every time we drove into one of these villages, the whole village was there to meet us. And I think that CRS really recognizes that, and they're using that and that's kind of one of the strengths that I think they've observed in these places in Ethiopia that have been affected by the drought, is that it's people who have been through a lot and are continuing to really face a lot of challenges in terms of the climate. And yet they have this really strong togetherness that's probably, I think, they're really their greatest resource. And I think they've done a good job of equipping that community and really empowering them to continue to manage those water sources and the other kind of projects that they help out with as well.
So it's it's an actual example of what Pope Francis calls for in Laudate Si, where they're working together for their common home, because they know that if they don't, or like you said, somebody would steal a solar panel, it hurts the community at large in the long run. Mm-hmm. That's very uplifting to hear that exists.
Yeah, I remember one with them saying, they said, if we live so far away from another village, you can't really be carrying a solar panel around and nobody's gonna, and get away with it because people are gonna, see it. At the same time, appreciating the gift that water, it's something so incomprehensible to us, but just for them, the gift of water. We also had the opportunity to be at the beginning of one of these, whatever the project's going to be, where we got to meet with a Somali community and just the initial stages of them kind of talking about what they're going through and what their needs are. So it was good for us, I think, because we got to see a beginning, a middle, and an end during our week that we were there.
When you're talking about visiting the villages, how many people, or how large is a village? It's not as big as a city, I'm thinking. They're small, or what are you encountering?
Yeah, small communities. I think that village that Father Romano was just talking about, I think it was around 1,000 people total, probably, who were part of this little community. And you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong on this, Father, but I believe that they had been living there. I don't know for how long exactly, but they had been displaced from where they had been originally, about 200 kilometers away, and they're kind of a nomadic type of community where they have these. They do move around and kind of move with the herds wherever they can find pasture land. And that's what they had kind of done. And basically what had happened was, they, in their search for better grazing land for their cattle and for their sheep, they kind of ended up in this place, and then they, didn't really discover any more pasture land, and they feel a little bit stuck. So there's about I think about 1,000 in this community. And I'd say it's probably, comparable with some of these other communities that we visited, but sometimes they're very spread out. So there is kind of like some central location. This one particular community, there was a school building, and that's where we were kind of meeting with all of the villagers there as we were just outside the school. But their homes are kind of spread all around that area. So it's kind of like, a pretty open area with a bunch of, little families. Maybe there's like a cluster of houses here, a cluster of houses there, but really, like, their life is so tied to their livestock and finding grazing land for them. And that was one thing that really stood out to me, is that all these small kind of tight-knit communities that are so close to the land and so close to their animals, they have a much more direct and intimate relationship with creation than I think we're used to mostly in America. I mean, maybe some people have that really close tie to the land, but these people really are so closely tied to the land and to the weather and to the animals that are there, way more than I've ever been, certainly, and than most people that I know back in the United States. So when you have something like this drought that's been going on, they've had 5 consecutive rainy seasons fail. And they had a little bit of rain here and there, but just not the rain that they need to really sustain any agriculture or even their livestock at this point. It really affects them because they're just so, like I said, so tied to the land that when those weather patterns seem to be shifting, it creates a real challenge for them.
In your travels throughout Ethiopia, did you'd mentioned that the bishop came to greet you, and that you were celebrating Holy Week, since it's the Eastern Orthodox. How ensconced is the Christian faith in Ethiopia from what you were able to see?
That's a great question. We were so Ethiopia I think they would say that the majority is Orthodox. Maybe just a little over 50% was Orthodox, and then about 45% would be Muslim. And Deacon Zane, what is it, like 1 or 2% were Catholic?
Very few Catholics.
Okay. And the section that we went at first, more towards the Somali border, was predominantly Muslim, at least probably 95% Muslim. And the Catholic population in that diocese, which is the largest diocese in Ethiopia, was only 10,000 Catholics.
Wow.
But covering a huge amount of territory, huge. And but they were doing all of this social work for Muslims. It was really amazing, and they understood that that's their role as Catholics, and that for the Muslim community, when they think Catholic, they think good. That they see that the Catholic Church is the one that's taking care of them and providing these resources and projects and collaborating with them and things like that. When we went to the capital, there was a more predominant Christian community. So we saw a lot of the Orthodox, and then we participated in a bit of the Ethiopian Catholic community's Good Friday service as well. But you certainly saw an ability for people of different faiths to live together very well. There didn't seem to be violence or anything like that, despite the difference in faith.
Oh, that's good to hear. That was actually going to be my follow-up question. Was Ethiopia known to have sort of sectarian violence like that? But it sounds like everyone gets along swimmingly, even in a drought.
Well, no, we can't say that. they've been in civil war. They've got tribal fights and things like that. But it does not seem to be Catholic versus Muslim or Orthodox versus Catholic or anything like that. But it seems to be more regional and tribal differences.
That makes more sense.
They've definitely gone through issues in Ethiopia.
Were you warned of any concerns regarding safety while you were there?
Go ahead, Deacon
Well,
Zane.
yeah, in the areas that we were, there wasn't really any security concern. However, the day that we landed, actually, so on our Easter Sunday, they had just gotten news that two CRS employees, and you might have even seen it on, kind of like Catholic News Agency or some of these Catholic media outlets, but unfortunately, two of their employees, CRS employees in Ethiopia, had been kind of caught in a crossfire with some violence up in one of the northern regions, and unfortunately had been killed. And so we found that out like the morning after. I think it was like the morning, like the second day that we were in Ethiopia. They kind of told us at breakfast that this had happened and assured us that we were safe with the places that we were going to. But that was I think that was certainly a harrowing moment for all of us, just to realize that, there are, in addition to like the climate problems and the drought situation that's affecting kind of the eastern region where we were, and also the southern region of Ethiopia, there has been in the past couple of years quite a bit of armed conflict, in some of the regions up in the north, especially. There's a pretty significant kind of civil war going on in the Tigray region. They recently kind of negotiated a peace treaty, but now the challenges and what's been happening is that the federal government is trying to kind of unite all the different regional militias, and kind of the regions are kind of defined along ethnic boundaries as well. And so they're trying to kind of incorporate all those different regional militias into one single national government. I think in an effort to really provide more stability in the country. But that's kind of, and that's what they think might have happened, is that some of these like local militias who may not have been okay with that idea, that they've kind of reacted negatively, and there's been some outbreaks of violence, and they think that might have been where these two CRS employees found themselves, was in one of these regions where there has been some violence, and so unfortunately they were killed. But I think the big message for me in that was that they were there conducting like a security analysis. So they were doing their job, going and trying to check out the situation and seeing, okay, like how are things in this region where we know we've been hearing there's violence, how are things going? And then how can we as CRS, how can we as the church kind of step in and support the people there? So they really died serving their brothers and sisters in Ethiopia, and kind of, I have no authority to declare them martyrs, of course, but they
What?
really were. They really died in the line of service, really died, trying to show the love of Christ and that charity and work for the good of those people in that region. So I think their example was I think we all kind of carried that with us in our hearts the whole time we were going through. And certainly we remembered to pray for them. Their names were Joel and Amare. So if everyone else could, also pray for the repose of their souls, and for all the CRS staffers there too. I'm sure it was difficult for them to hear about some of their colleagues being killed, but I really realized, and that was another moment where I realized, wow, like the work that these people in Ethiopia are doing, the work that CRS is doing there. I mean, they are, so committed to the point of, in some cases, giving their lives, really laying down their lives for the sake of others, for the sake of those people who are vulnerable and in need there in Ethiopia. So,
in knowing, hearing that news, right, after Holy Week and Easter, and then now in the Orthodox Holy Week and Easter, was there an added sense of just kind of living our faith and the spirituality during your trip in Ethiopia that might not have been there in a non-Easter season kind of a thing, do you think? Or maybe because you're seminarians and priests are always in that state of grace. I don't know.
That's right.
If only. I think at first we were kind of like, oh, we just went through Lent. I can't believe we're going through Holy Week again.
That's true.
However, it was, it was really beautiful to be able to to live that out, to experience it. It was jarring, I think, for us at first to hear about these two employees that were killed. I would say we felt safe the entire time, but that once news was going to get out around the United States, that then your family's going to worry about you or your diocese and things like that. And you did feel badly for the people from CRS as well as their collaborators that took us around, knowing that they were carrying that with them and yet still had to really be taking care of us for the week and couldn't give up, couldn't leave us, abandon us, and kind of go and be with their families. So there was a chance to give that. I would say one of the more moving moments as far as the Holy Week was our Good Friday experience with the Ethiopian Catholic community. They must have their own right because it was completely different than anything that we do. And so we were at this church and they got rid of all of the pews. They had mats down, and you can just see kind of where like the cultures kind of influence each other. And so the Orthodox did the same sort of movements as Muslims would do as well. We didn't understand what they were chanting but for about 20 straight minutes. Ultimately, we started to figure out that they were singing "Lord have mercy," but they were right, Kyrie eleison, and then they were putting themselves down and then getting back up and down and up. And it had to be very difficult for them, and they did that as their way of uniting themselves to the suffering of Christ.
They were singing. They were all singing together. It was just a powerful sound. Like everyone just singing their hearts out. I was most proud. There was these two deacons up in the front that were kind of leading the chants. And, as a deacon, I was kind of like I felt like they were my brothers in arms. I was really proud of them, because they're just like, they're singing into the microphone just with everything they have. And, they would like take breaks. It's like, they'd go for like an hour and then they'd kind of go out and take a break and someone else would come in and take over. But they spend all day, pretty much all day at the church. It's just what you do on Good Friday is you go to the church and you kind of, you sing and you pray together. You listen to the scriptures, you listen to the gospels, the accounts of the passion, and you kind of, try to unite yourself with the suffering of Christ. It was really powerful to see them all as a community really celebrating that together. Very powerful.
Now, you were probably also moved by the singing because you also are a singer yourself. Is that true?
Well, that's true. Yes. Yeah.
I heard right before, was it on Easter Vigil at St. Peter's, or you got to chant? Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I had the amazing gift and opportunity to chant the Exultet at the beginning of the Easter Vigil Mass at St. Peter's Basilica. So there was myself and there was about 5 other deacons who were helping out with the Mass. And my job was, I was kind of, I guess I call myself the deacon of the Paschal Candle. So whenever there was something with the Paschal Candle, I was the one holding it. So that meant at the beginning of Mass, like I go right up to Pope Francis as he does, and you might have seen this before, but at the Easter Vigil, you're at the fire and there's a special blessing of the Paschal Candle where you trace the sign of the cross, you trace like the numbers of the current year, and you put some grains of incense in there, because really the Paschal Candle is like an offering of praise to God in the midst of the Easter Vigil and really throughout the Easter season. So I was like right there with Pope Francis as he was tracing, the sign of the cross. Wow. There's some really cool pictures of me, like just inches from the Pope's face, basically. So that's kind of amazing. And then, going up to the front of to the main altar of the Basilica and putting the candle in its place. And then I was able to chant the Exultet, the prayer that goes along with that. And I'll never forget, unforgettable moment. We talk a lot of times about, coming over and studying in Rome is really getting, having the opportunity to study for the priesthood in the heart of the church. And in that moment, when I was standing there with the Paschal Candle lit right next to me in St. Peter's Basilica, and there's thousands of Catholics from all over the world, gathered there. There's Pope Francis, who kind of gave me the blessing before I went and did the Exultet, the chant. And then in the front row, there's all these catechumens, people who are entering the church, getting ready to be baptized by the Pope. So, I've never felt more in the heart of the church than in that moment. And it's something I'm never going to forget.
I'm sure.
To go from that to, this very different experience in Ethiopia. And yet that was the amazing thing is like, this tireless work of charity and really social justice for communities in need. That is just as Catholic as singing the Exultet at St. Peter's on the Easter Vigil. So like both of those things were were really, powerful experiences of what it really means to be Catholic, what it really means to follow Christ and to lay down one's life for him. I mean, both so to go from like one extreme kind of to the other, and to realize that, both of these are really living out the gospel.
Well, as you were telling the story of your time in the Vatican, that's exactly what I was thinking of. What an incredible opportunity in such a short period of time to see sort of the I don't know, the two spectrums of our faith. The majesty of the Vatican, while at the same time the field hospital of being out there amongst the people. That's Jen loves it when I use phrases like field hospital.
I love that phrase. I do.
Father Romano, you said that this. I will admit that your email shocked me on a number of levels. For one, you remembered how to get a hold of me. The thing but you said you were really touched by it. You said, I mean, this trip really made an impact on you, and as someone, granted, we're not Midwesterners, but we are from, the farmland of South Jersey. So, we're not people of Africa. To know that you went there and were really touched by what you saw and who you interacted with, it must have been a powerful experience.
So one of my jokes is I tell the seminarians, because they don't know about South Jersey, I say that we're like the Midwest of the Northeast. That's how I describe South Jersey. But I spent an entire week, I would say, proud to be a Catholic and proud to be an American. Because Catholic Relief Services is an organization of the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. It's our donations through Rice Bowl and things like that make this work possible. It's also the goodness of the American government and the money that they provide to feed the poor and things like that. So just to watch, and I would say everywhere we went, people would talk about CRS. So in Ethiopia, there are 18 missionary of charity convents, and every single one of the centers that the missionaries of charity run is aided by CRS. And they would talk about the food that they provide, the services that they, are coming up with, even their creativity, Catholic Relief Services now, on how to help the missionaries of charity to not only take care of pregnant women, but then find a way to make sure that the children are fed, but also not just fed, but that they receive an education. And then how do you make it more holistic so that they can make a life for themselves and eventually go to college and then start their own business and things like that. But all of the sisters would always talk about Catholic Relief Services, these Muslim communities with that. And then this diocese, in Harar, that just would talk about, they do all of this social work, but they wouldn't be able to do it were it not for CRS. And, and they do it really at a sacrifice themselves. The bishop talked to us about how, they receive this funding and they take care of the people in the drought-stricken areas, but then he doesn't have enough money for his priests to have a salary. He doesn't have enough money for his priests to have cars. They're closing some of their Catholic schools because they don't have the funding for that. And yet they still see the mission of reaching out and taking care of, people suffering more than them. It was just so beautiful and inspiring. So for me, it was an incredible week. That opened my eyes to things, but also just filled me with a great sense of pride in what the Catholic Church in the United States is able to do for places outside of the United States.
How do you, both for either you, Father Romano, or Deacon Zane, how do you think the experience in Ethiopia will influence your ministries going forward?
I think so much. I think about the Rice Bowl project, and I grew up, in Catholic schools, and that was always part of our, part of the deal. When Lent started, we each got our little rice bowl and brought it home, and we put quarters in there and things like that, and it was around, but it's like I don't think I had really an appreciation for what it meant to be contributing to that. And I think even up until probably this year before I came on this trip, it was really like I saw contributing to Rice Bowl and those kinds of initiatives as kind of okay, like, well, like I'm a Catholic, I'm a Christian, so that means like I'm supposed to give money to the poor. So like this is my kind of outlet for that. And then when you're in these communities and you're with these people with whom Catholic Relief Services is partnering, when you're staring into the eyes of some of these people who, yeah, haven't had rain in 3 years, and you realize that it's because of those donations that this irrigation project is able to happen. It just, I can't really explain how it just transformed that entire reality. The entire reality of what the Rice Bowl is to me will never be the same. And I think because of that, the way that I encourage my parishioners someday as a priest to contribute to the Rice Bowl and these kinds of projects will never be the same, because I've seen the need that's there in places like Ethiopia. I've seen how those funds are used and how well they're used. And I've seen, kind of like Father Romano was saying, we saw kind of a before, a during, and an after project. It's like I've kind of seen what can happen when CRS, Catholic Relief Services, gets the type of resources that they need, how they can just really transform people's lives, and bear witness to the gospel. It just made me realize that, the work that we do in fundraising, that's kind of the work that we have in the American church. And a lot of people, the people in these local communities really told us that. They said, you're from America, like you have water, you have life, like you have money, way more than we do. It's like we need water. That's kind of the way that they just, whenever you'd ask these people, like, what's your greatest need? Like, how can we help you? It's really like, we need water. So like, please help CRS to get us water. That's really like what we heard from people. And it just made me realize that, okay, like I as an American and as a deacon, as a soon to be priest, like I'm never going to be able to install irrigation systems. I'm never going to be able to like organize large scale emergency food distribution programs in Ethiopia. Right. But like what I am going to be doing and helping, helping spread the word about this work and hopefully get people to contribute and support CRS is actually making that work possible. So those two things go hand in hand. And I think it was this like really practical experience of solidarity that you can't really get otherwise than actually by being there and being with these people, being with, both with the people in need and the people who are helping them. It's just something that has really formed my heart in a way that I never would have expected. And I think I'm never going to be able to, go through a season of Lent and start a Rice Bowl at my parish, without thinking about the trip that I had to Ethiopia, the things that I saw there. So it's going to affect my entire priesthood.
And that priesthood is starting soon. Am I correct? Are you being ordained soon to the priesthood?
Yeah, that's right. So today I've got a countdown. I've had a countdown on my phone since 1 year out. So today is 40 days until I'm ordained a priest. So I'll be ordained on June 3rd at the Cathedral of the Immaculate Conception in Fort Wayne. And then my first mass will be the next day at my home parish in Mishawaka, Indiana, St. Bavo. Shout out to Father Pete Piscini and all the good people at St. Bavo. I don't know if they're going to be listening to this, probably not. But your very own Father Michael Romano is going to be preaching my first mass, actually.
Wow.
So
wow.
Can't wait to share that experience with him and see what he's got cooked up for the homily.
It'd be wonderful. He's going to be a great priest, so pray for him.
Yeah. Absolutely. Congratulations. We'll be praying for you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And we're going to send the podcast to the shout out priest. Let us know who it is and we'll send it to him. So
all right. Sounds good.
Oh, no. We'll be sending this to the diocese and making sure that they do a little sharing as well, because this really does sound like it was a great experience. But more importantly, it sounds like it's the kind of thing that is going to really benefit you as a priest going forward, that you've been able to sort of see this and understand this. And it certainly sounds like it's going to benefit CRS, because I got to tell you, listening to the story, I've already figured out that Jen is going to be writing one heck of a promo story based on this conversation alone for next year's Rice Bowl. And I'm going to get in touch with her. I love the Rice Bowl. I think Rice Bowl happens to be one of those truly great public relations things. Remember, I'm a public relations person, so your stories meant nothing to me, but I was thinking about how I could improve the Rice Bowl. And I think we're going to stick a Venmo QR code on it for everyone who doesn't carry change around anymore. So it still serves a purpose, but you don't need to worry about putting your nickels and dimes in there. Well, listen, I got to tell you, this has been an absolutely outstanding episode of Talking Catholic. Father Romano and Deacon Zane, I really appreciate the fact that you both came on. Father, in particular, thank you for thinking of even doing this. I would not be surprised at all if Jen turns this into something even more than just the podcast with an article and maybe a few other elements to this at some point. So thank you again for making this possible, and please, keep up all the great work. And Father Romano, keep inviting me over to Italy as often as possible so that I can come hang out.
Happy to have you.
I got to tell you, one of the truly great experiences of that pilgrimage. Yes, I went to the Vatican, and yes, I went to the Holy Land, but being able to tour the Pontifical North American College was really impressive. So that is a great facility that you're supporting right now. So thank you for that opportunity. We will get you over there shortly. I promise.
Yay!
You're welcome anytime, Jen.
Well, thank you, everybody.
Thanks so much.
We really appreciate this. And to our listeners, we'll be back again next week. See you, everybody.